got my chai tea latte here.
I wanted to get a drink myself, and I didn't get anything.
Oh man, well, now's the time to do it if you
Locked
want.
off. No, no, it's okay. I'll be
Gotcha.
fine. It's gonna be
Good, good.
miserable.
Yeah. Well, we'll try and make it last long. So, just drag out the suffering. Quick intro here for people who don't know Jason. This is Jason Calhoun. I had the pleasure of working with Jason at BuildWit when I was there.
You sweetheart.
And Jason's a video editor and also these days also a AI. I like how you phrase it on LinkedIn, an AI wizard. Really, like somebody who's spending a lot of time thinking about what the future is going to look like, and not afraid to face some of the uncomfortable realities of what the future is going to look like for people in marketing and video editing and stuff like that. So, Jason and I have had opportunities to talk about this stuff before, but I'm excited to get back into it again. Jason, thanks for coming on.
Oh, heck yeah. You're fantastic. I was so happy you asked me because we talked before and it was such a good conversation. And I always enjoyed. You're like, I said this before, but you're one of the most unique people in the way that you connect with others. Like you seem to have an authentic concern and care for other people, which is a rare thing in the world. I think so.
Man,
I
thanks.
appreciate you reaching out. And yeah, it was awesome working with you. I was glad I got to know you.
Man, that's super kind of you to say that. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I think there's a whole nother conversation, about like the times that we had at BuildWit, but it was a lot of fun I think for me, it was the first opportunity I had to work with like a big team of super talented people. Usually I was like, a contractor or a one-man marketing person. This was like the first role where I was like with the greats. It felt like, there's like people who
100%. I felt the same way. I felt like the weakest link on that team. Yeah, I was like,
so
these people are so over my head. Yeah, no, it was awesome though. I learned a ton.
Yeah, same here. So, and I got to meet you, which was another like amazing benefit. So, enough buttering each other up here. Let's
keep going. Let's just keep saying really nice things about each other, and then we're going to feel great. Nobody else will get anything out of this podcast, but man, we're going to leave it feeling great.
Oh man, that's what it's about, man. Let's start. I think the best place to start is probably maybe let's talk about like your background in video. You've been doing video for a while and worked on a lot of different things. Can you give a quick highlight reel, if you will, of what you do? Maybe we'll throw an actual highlight reel in here over your, with your voiceover.
Yeah. Do it. Promote me. I've done video all my life. Since I was a little kid, I wanted to be Steven Spielberg and drug my brother into home movies. And ever since then, I have been obsessed with, I wanted to be a filmmaker originally. That was the plan. And then I met my wife really young. We got married. She was 18. I was 20. And so the realities of life when you're married young set in real quick. And I was like, becoming a film director is going to take a lot of time and we need money today. So you just start finding opportunities that presented themselves in video. Like, how could I use a camera to make money? And then a computer to make money. So that set me off in just doing all kinds of stuff. I'm from California, near the Bay Area. So my trajectory in video kind of led myself to the Bay Area with a lot of tech startups that were popping up around the same time. Social media was really booming around the time that I really started getting into video. So it kind of led me down new opportunities that never even were available to anybody before they were available to me, especially with YouTube. And YouTube's been really the biggest driver of everything I've done, especially as of late. The YouTube, I think what that did, especially for video people, was just open the door to so many different ways of editing because people were putting out content and they just wanted to get views. So people, editors especially, were able to really hone the skill of how do you get people to watch a video and engage with them and get them to watch the whole video. And so over time, it's just led to so many different ways of presenting content to the world. So, so YouTube really has always been my favorite platform for video, and especially lately. But yeah, so that's been, so through that, I've been able to work with just a bunch of different companies, big companies and little tiny companies and startups and nonprofits. I did a lot of nonprofit work for a while. And so it's just opened the door, because even huge companies, you know, you have an avenue into them, or at least a way in, because they all need videos, from, you know, huge, big budget kind of stuff to just small little internal videos. So it kind of, at least for a while, and I think it still is this way, you know, there's a ton of opportunity. You just really have to figure out what you want to do with it, what you want to do with video, because there's just so many ways of presenting it to the world. Yeah.
That's the YouTube part, like that you mentioned, is super interesting to me, like, because it, you know, you talk about like wanting to be a filmmaker, and that, you know, that career path has its own set of, like, you know, understanding how to craft a compelling film that people want to watch and that they, you know, like, and then write a great story. Like, there's a ton of stuff there, but then stuff like YouTube comes along, and like you said, like, there's a different, I mean, all of that stuff still applies, but there's another dynamic of, when you're a filmmaker, you know, you create the whole thing. Usually that's like a long process of months or even years of writing and pre-production and shooting and post, and then you release it to the world, and then you hope that it worked, and it's just like, you know, it's like a really, really big project, and then you just have the ratings and reviews to tell you whether it worked, like whether you did the right things. And with YouTube, it became, in some cases, not all the time, but in some cases, it's become a much smaller project. But then you also got way more visibility into what actually did work. Like, you have watch time, and you have, you know, even the things like thumbnails, which I got to chat with Chase Lyons about, you know, like, there's these smaller touch points that can give you more feedback than just, you know, what the user said.
And immediate feedback.
Yeah, immediate. Yeah, you can literally sit on your analytics channel, you know, page, and watch in real time to see whether it's resonating and whether you're holding people through to the end, and at what point, like, did you lose their interest. That all just opened up a whole new world of, like, more understanding of like your craft.
Yeah, that's the thing, because, you know, with the film, you have so many different people working on it. So it is kind of, it's a lot of different people's vision, in a sense, because it's a particular, you know, say the cast of the film. It's like their vision of it. Everybody contributes to it, and it's a huge process, obviously. And so you end up with something that is formulaic to some sense, but because it took so long to build, it's just sort of like a collection of different people's vision. So yeah, you couldn't, I think, look at film and really take a lot from that in terms of how you're going to create, say, a video. If you're somebody like me who, prior to YouTube and prior to the internet, all you really had to look to for inspiration or new ideas, new techniques that you wanted to bring into your own craft, you had films, you had TV, commercials, and that was about it. But all of that, because it took so much time and there was such a machine behind it, you know, a particular decision that a filmmaker or a commercial made, you didn't really know what the idea behind that was. Like, why did they choose to go that direction? Why did they choose that lens? Or, you know, if you really nerded out for me, or why did they cut it that way? Yeah. You know, so the reason behind it could be a million different things. It was either director's vision, it could have been the cinematographer's vision. And so, yeah, exactly what you're saying is so true with YouTube, because you have immediate feedback. And the other difference, I think, is that you have a captive audience with film versus an uncaptive audience with video. So your approach to it really is just to gather attention as quick as you can. So you kind of understood when you were watching a YouTube video, especially like a larger creator, or if there was money behind the channel, so which let you know that, like, they're really going for views. They're looking at all of the analytics. You could take all of that information and apply it to what you were doing, and you understood why they were making those decisions, because it was the same reason that you wanted to learn from them, right? You wanted to capture an audience, capture their attention, get them to watch the whole video. I guess that's like the biggest difference is you'd watch a bunch of stuff and you find somebody's style that you liked, but you didn't really understand, why did they choose that? It wasn't necessarily because it made it a better video. It didn't necessarily mean that more people would watch it. But with YouTube, it does mean that. People just continually craft this machine that just continually gets better and better. And I think you look at YouTube videos now, and depending on what you're into and what you watch, but you watch somebody like Mr. Beast, who's been like the gold standard. I mean, the videos are just so stinking captivating. It's like amazing what they've been able to do. Whereas, anyways, it is. It's like, it's amazing because you can learn just by watching. Yeah. And that the reason they chose that shot or that cut was to get people to watch and engage. And so you can, if you're like a business or you're trying to get views on your content, it's like, it's pretty easy to see what works and what doesn't. Yeah. To some extent, at least easier than it used to be. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of like, the feedback and the ability to like look at other, especially with the number of different channels and different people who are creating videos on YouTube now, you can find people who are very similar to you or people who are very different, in a different category or a different type of content or subject, but you can pull those learnings from them and inspiration from them in ways that it was harder to do when there's much fewer fewer people playing the game, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's been such a, YouTube especially. I mean, I suppose any platform you could point to creators who are monetizing their content and like that's how they're making their living. But YouTube's, I think, at least from a video creator standpoint, that's literally how people are making their money is by getting people to watch their videos. Yeah, so it's amazing some of the quality content that's been put out there and what's been learned and gained. Especially my real interest right now is like post-production. It used to be more like behind the camera, but it's behind the computer now. So seeing how people are using the computer and editing to bring in an audience and engage with them, it's like, it just blows my mind, the creativity and what people are doing. Just the subtle little things that you look at and you're just like, dang, like that. Just the subtlety is what makes such a massive difference. Because that's the other thing now is everybody copies each other. Like that's the really interesting thing is just everybody in the world copies each other. So as soon as like a trend or something seems to be gaining traction, it's like everybody does it. And so then it doesn't have the impact anymore. So the speed at which new techniques and new ways of gaining an audience's attention are being worked out with each other on such a mass scale is amazing. Like it's changing so rapidly. But then the interesting thing too is that most of the tactics and techniques that work best come back to the traditional story and what worked in film. So it's a really, I think it's exciting because you're seeing like new trends, new ideas applied to the old foundational methods that have always worked. And it's just, so it's always changing. You're always learning something new, which is cool for me. I love that part.
Yeah, exactly. Man, I think, so this is a fascinating thing to me because you talk about things changing. I remember our conversation when you and I left BuildWit and you were talking about like what you're going to do next. You were looking around, at potentially working for someone or doing projects, and you came back to me and were like, this, like the world is different. This was it beginning of this year? It was. It's only like a year ago.
It's a year, almost exactly a year.
Crazy. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is. I know.
We talked, and you were like, something feels different about like the video environment, and you started digging into it. Tell me about like what's changed in the last year and a half. Whatever, because the timeline is not very long. So tell me about that. Like, what did you see when you kind of came back into the I guess the market, if you will.
Yeah.
What was different?
The first thing I noticed wasn't a direct result of AI
Hmm.
to some extent. It was a direct result of YouTube and algorithms, which are AI.
Hmm.
So the first initial thing that I saw coming back into the world was that editing had gotten really cheap because a company who needed an editor could and still can hire an editor from anywhere in the world, where the rates are much lower, but the quality is pretty dang good. And it's really good because of YouTube, because like I said, you can watch what works and apply it to your skill set. Even if you don't have a skill set, you can learn it because of
Yeah.
YouTube and tutorials. Um, so there's the standard of quality, I think, raised across the globe, where you could just hire somebody
Hmm.
from anywhere that was like really good quality. So that was the first thing I noticed, is just the cost came down a lot. So it's hard for a lot of companies to justify spending a lot of money, like what I was typically charging,
Yeah.
for basically the same thing they can get from somewhere else. And then when
Hmm.
I saw that initially, that was the first thing I noticed. Then I really started diving into AI and realized that what had happened with initially with AI and analytics and YouTube that had sort of even the playing field was going to
Hmm.
happen on such a larger scale, because it wasn't going to be people learning these skills. It was going to be
Hmm.
machines learning these skills, you know? And so I thought, I didn't know what the speed was going to be, how quick machines would be able to catch up with my skills behind a computer. But looking at the trajectory of how quick and how well and how easy it was to communicate with a computer when GPT-3 came out, I just
Hmm.
thought, man, it's only a matter of time. You know, the same thing's going to happen where, you know, it used to be like if you wanted a really good editor, you hired somebody who was in your own area, usually, you know,
Hmm.
somebody who would like come and work for you. And then it was like, well, now you can hire somebody anywhere in the country or anywhere in the state. And then it was anywhere in the world, and the cost came down. And I'm like, well, with machines now, it's going to be free. And this is going to be
Yeah.
churning out the same level of content that I can create, pretty dang close anyways,
Hmm.
quick. And so I think over the last year, I've seen how fast that's developed. Like, for sure, it
Yeah.
hasn't replaced me yet, but
Hmm.
in some cases it has, because you can use some of these AI tools. And if you're just like I say, a business owner who just needs cheap content thrown out there, the quality
Yeah.
doesn't matter as much. Like, that's pretty much solvable with technology now. You don't even need to
Yeah.
hire anybody. And
Exactly.
so the level of quality just keeps jumping faster and faster and higher and higher. So
Hmm.
some of the tools that are embedded in, I use Adobe, I use Premiere
Hmm.
primarily, and some of the tools they've implemented into Adobe just in the last few months are like game changing. Like we were just
Hmm.
talking before we started recording, like some of the audio tools where you can
Yeah.
take the most garbage audio and press a button, and it, to my ear, it sounds like it was professionally recorded in a studio.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, who does that replace? You know, it's just happening really quick. So anyways, I realize
Yeah.
I'm out of a job. It's just they haven't fired me yet, in a sense. I've been replaced in a sense. That's how I'm looking at it. Um,
Yeah.
it's just, so I don't know. I keep creeping up to like higher and higher end is what I'm trying to do, because that's like,
Yeah.
it's almost like the little room that I'm in. I'm in like a closed off room, and the water it's filling with water, and I'm just going higher and higher to the top. But I know like eventually there's going to be no more oxygen left. So got to figure out, I got to open the door and swim somewhere else, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty rough sounding analogy there.
But I think, yeah, it's like, I mean, maybe it's not life and death, but dang,
Yeah.
it can feel like it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah.
and I think if you, I think a lot of people, especially if they work in this, if they sit behind a computer and that's how you make
Hmm.
your living, is you sit and you do things, you create things with a computer. Like, the writing's on the wall. I think most people have kind of turned that corner. I think originally people were like, I don't know. I don't see as many people who are like, I don't know. I don't think I'm going to be replaced. I think most people have realized, like, assuming that the technology continues to progress at the same speed that it has, and so far there's been no slowdown that I've seen.
Hmm.
You know, it's just sort of like, it's just a matter of time, and nobody knows when that time is. But I think now is, like we talked about last time, this is where our conversation went, is like, now is the time to jump ship and figure out, like, what do you offer the world that doesn't
Hmm.
require you to create something in front of a computer necessarily? Like,
Yeah.
what else do you offer? And there's a lot that you offer. It's just now's the time to figure out what are those things and how can you monetize that.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's the part of this conversation that I get excited about, because it's like I think we can, and I know I've done this before, is I've tied my identity to like a specific set of skills, technical or, you know, creative skills, if you will, but they're like, you know, it's that, you know, the ability to execute a certain thing becomes your identity. It's who you are. And then the world changes around you, and all of a sudden that identity isn't worth what it used to be, both financially or otherwise. Like, you know, it's not just about the money, although money can be a big part of it if it's how you make your living. But, you know, that shift requires us to re-examine, like, okay, what is it that makes like me, the, you know, the set of experiences and knowledge and opinions and like strong beliefs that make me who I am? What makes that, like, what do I have to bring to the world? Because, and it's time for me to reassess that, because what I thought that was, now the world doesn't need that, or it doesn't need it the way that it used to. So, you know, we're kind of just forced to go back to the drawing board in a sense and say, okay, well, you know, what I have been doing, you know, it was valuable, and now maybe it's not as valuable, or maybe, you know, the set of beliefs that I had around what I do, maybe I have to re-examine them and you know, in light of what's changed recently, and see, am I still, you know, do I still understand the world correctly, or do I need to like look at it again with new eyes?
Yeah, you do, I think. 100%. I think you said that's exactly right. Like, the world is changing around us really rapidly, and we don't know in which ways, but because it's changing a lot of different ways. There's a lot of things. I tell people this. I'm such an optimist, I thought, but I think it's kind of shifted lately, because I tell people, like, you look toward the future, and it's hard to look in any direction in the future and think, yeah, things look great. Things look really good for all of us. So it's like there's a lot of things to look to in the future that can cause us to think, yeah, things are changing 100%. Like, that's one thing I think we can be sure of, is the future is going to look different than it does today. And the future is probably happening tomorrow. You know, like the future is coming at us like a freight train. And and the hard thing is we don't know what the future is going to look like. But assuming that outside of AI, there's a lot that could happen, I guess is what I'm saying. But assuming that those other things don't change our world before AI does, if you just look at the technological progress, and you can kind of get a sense for what the world's going to look like in the future to some extent, and you just know that the way that we've made a living, especially in, I think, the white collar world, because we're so dependent on computers and technology, like, that's what is going away, is the way that we interact with technology is changing dramatically, to where I think that's what's you do two things, is the way I'm looking at it. If you're like a white collar creative, you make your living in front of a computer. I think you either figure out how to make a living or find an identity outside of the computer. Like, the blue collar world is probably going to be the last ones to have a paycheck, collect a paycheck the way that they have for a long time. Or I think you look into kind of what you were saying, is you look into yourself, your values, literally, like, you, because I think that's the side I've been looking at for myself. And I think that this is true for everybody. I think that we need to invest a lot more time into making ourselves the product, in a sense, because what you do with the computer doesn't matter so much, but how you interact with others is what's going to matter in the future, I think. So literally, I mean, one of the best things, I think, I'd love to hear your idea. I can't remember if we talked about this before, but I felt like if you're somebody like me who knows how to use a computer, one of the best things we can do right now is, like, start a YouTube channel, or start like put content out there, like you've been doing really well, so that people start to connect with you, not what you do necessarily, not what you do behind a computer, not what you create with a computer, outside of just you're putting you out there. because that,
Yeah.
I think, as I look at it, that's the only thing that AI and technology can't replace, is literally you and your voice and how you communicate and the thoughts that you have. And if you can find an audience, if you can find people that find an interest literally in you, again, not what you're
Yeah.
creating with the computer to give to somebody, just you, um, I think that's kind of all we're left with as I look at it. I don't see anywhere else you're going to make a career, or,
Yeah.
using a device, using a computer. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think that there's, I don't actually know what to think in terms of what what the next roles are going to look like. But I think we may have talked about this the last time you and I talked. But like, there have been a lot of technological advances in the last 100 to 200 years that were supposed to replace human labor that still haven't. Or I should say, like they replaced them, but we're still working 40+ hour weeks. To make a living. So there's an element of that where, like, I have some skepticism that we won't have anything to do, but because that goes into kind of the utopian view of like, well, all humans will just be able to sit around while robots do work for them, or the dystopian view of none of us will be worth anything and we'll all be living on the street begging robots for money
If we're here at all.
Yeah, yeah. But I think I mentioned this to you before, but I think that there's a messy middle that we're going to go into, just because historically that's how I see these kind of major technological changes to play out. Is like they're at the time when things are changing, there's a lot of uncertainty because we can't visualize what the future looks like, the way that it actually will play out, and so we end up with these like different views, either positive or negative, that end up not being an accurate reflection of how it actually ends up. But but that part aside, I think going back to what you were saying about like what we can do to prepare for an uncertain future, I think you're absolutely right there. Putting the time into understanding what it is that makes us individually as humans like meaningful. I would say valuable, but it's more than that. It's like what is the meaning that you can bring, that you do bring as a person, and how can you share that with the world? How can you share that with others? It's that ability to examine ourselves and understand our strengths and weaknesses, to figure out, thinking beyond just ourselves as well, to think about how am I uniquely positioned to help other people, and then putting in the hard work that it takes to bring that to other people and to actually help them. And hopefully for a lot of us that means that it pays our bills. That's great as well. Sometimes that means that it's it might be a charitable thing, or a humanitarian thing, but for a lot of us, that thing that we identify still has to pay our bills. It still has to be our living, and that's okay. Like that's right. That's appropriate if we are, if we're doing that honestly and actually helping other people. That's great, but we have to be able to look inside and say, what is it that a computer can't replace? And when we find those things, what is it? Is it your understanding of other human beings, which computers currently are not great at doing? And being able to empathize. Is it your in this case, like in the shorter term, for you, like you mentioned earlier, moving kind of up into the higher end work? I think that's going to be a big shift that we're going to see, which we saw with other technological advances. Is like, when we started building robots that would build cars, we didn't put people out of work building cars. in a sense, I mean, we put some people out of work building cars, but there are still people employed in the process. They just moved into higher tier roles, or more like decision-making roles as opposed to labor roles. Now you're not, mounting the whatever it, you're not handcrafting the fenders on the car. You're running the robot that makes the fenders for the car. Those kind of the changes will happen with the machine learning AI changes that are coming. And right now it's just hard sometimes to picture what those are. But that's what I think, to bring the conversation back around, I think that's where what you are doing and have been doing this year, to me, is like something that everyone can learn from, is recognizing that, hey, things are changing, the world's not the same as it was, and then not shying away from that, not trying to like turn a blind eye and figure out, well, how can I just make this work, and hopefully it doesn't catch up to me before I have to retire. But looking at it and saying,
Yeah.
the world's different. How do I fit into it now? And what can I bring?
Yeah. Yeah. That is the trickiest part for me also, because I know that I need to find my way out of video, at least in my opinion, because the difference with the technology we have today, to me, with AI, is we're not creating like a robot that can do what a human can do. We're creating another intelligence that's going to think outside of ourselves and think in ways that we can't. So it's hard. Like it's exactly what you said. We don't know what the future is going to look like. We don't know what the opportunities are going to be. So in the meantime, all we can do is try to keep up. But the hard thing with keeping up is, and I was chasing the newest AI tools for a long time, and then trying to utilize them and trying to set myself up as like the AI expert. And then the thing you realize really quick is that what AI is doing is it's just making itself seamless to where that's where it's heading. Is you don't need an expert to run AI. It just does it for you. It becomes the thing that runs itself. So I stopped kind of chasing the tools. I was just like, the tools are just making themselves available to everybody. And so the best thing I can do is just use them with whatever skills I have, because for the time being, there's still this need for humans using AI. I think that's only a matter of time. But where do we go from here? That's the hard thing. It's exactly what this is the right conversation to have, I think. It's just looking at yourself differently, trying to pull myself away from the thing that I know how to do with the computer. That's what's hard, because in the meantime, like you said, you still got to pay the bills. So it's hard to make that jump off the ship that's keeping you afloat when there's no other ship to jump into. So yeah, it's tough. You're like building another ship because the waters are changing. You don't know what you need to build to continue floating. Yeah. It's tricky for everybody.
Yeah,
nobody knows what this is going to be.
Right. Yeah. I think this comes down, when it comes to like dealing with an uncertain future and figuring out what to do next, the ability to like build and practice flexibility, right, and resilience, and being able to like try new things sets us up to be able to handle that, right? Like just the fact that you have been trying out AI tools, and that you've moved between different ones, and maybe you're realizing that this isn't providing the value you thought it was, or whatever. That kind of stuff has to happen. It's just like the startup, to go to startups for an analogy, for startups, the biggest indicator of whether or not they're going to make it long term is how quickly they learn from failures. So some of the smartest people that I know in the startup world have advised me that like the number one thing you need to be able to do is fail very, very quickly and learn from those failures, because your time is the enemy, and the more time you spend learning a lesson, the less time you have to figure out how to continue functioning as a business, right? So the same thing applies to us. Like, how quickly can we learn, and how quickly can we fail so that we can learn, because otherwise, we're not learning if everything seems to work and we can't see what didn't work.
So true. We're going to have to face a lot of unknowns because I think that we're facing something that I don't think has ever, the level of change that we're going to see, I don't think any other generation has ever seen before. Like I think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is my optimism. My optimism is failing me, but I looked to almost any other thing that's happened in the world. You can kind of relate to something in the past. Like this has happened in the past, so we can learn from others' mistakes and we can apply principles that worked before today. And I think that's true to some extent. I think you're right. We have to be very adaptable, learn quickly, but we're just facing something that nobody's ever faced before. We've never had another intelligence on the planet that is learning. It's in its infancy, but we don't know what that's going to bring. So I think you're right. I think being adaptable is probably that's what humans do best anyways. We're very, very adaptable. So I think the more you can begin to pry away your claws that are dug into whatever security you have right now and whatever makes sense to you right now, I think now is the time to like begin pulling those away, just so that you're more pliable to what's coming. You're more ready to be adaptable, at least even in your mindset and your way of thinking. Because I think that those who cling the hardest to the rock that they currently are attached to are the ones who are at least going to have the roughest time with it, with what's going to come, because it's just going to be, you're going to be forcibly removed from that rock, I guess. So I think, I think that's the best approach to take is like loosen your grip from the rock and maybe even jump in the water, because because if you can start to swim and start to figure out what does this look like, and you're at least ready to grab hold of what comes next. But if you're clinging onto that rock, and you don't even have the opportunity to grab hold of something new. So I think that's the best thing we can do is just shift. At least that's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. That's all I'm trying to do is shift my thinking into trying to face the reality that that things are changing very rapidly, and I think in ways that we don't even see. I think that there's who knows what's happening with Sam Altman, but I think whatever's happening with GPT-5 might blow our minds, and I think that the change could happen way quicker than we think. It could, maybe it won't, but I guess let go of the rock is like what I'm trying to do. But it's tough to do because that rock feels real good right now. but it's being washed away, I guess.
Yeah. I think that there's on the topic of like what exactly this is going to look like and how much it's going to change things. I mean, every one of us has our own vision of what that looks like, and it's a broad spectrum from like nothing is going to change to everything will change. And I think you and I are
I don't mean to throw you off course, but in the conversations that you've had, what percentage would you say in like the professional world anyways, the world that you encounter, what percentage do you feel like are doom and gloom versus things are rosy, things are going to be fine?
I think overall people are taking most people are taking I would say actually are pretty unaware of how much has changed over the last year. I shouldn't say in the professional world. It kind of depends on, because it depends on what part of the professional world. Where I'm seeing the most people, like the most awareness, is in the spaces of creativity, video editing, photographers and photo editing, writers, copywriters, website builders. There's a lot, of course, in the technological side of things. There's a lot of awareness that, this somebody just created a new tool in 3 days that does 90% of the work that I get paid, $100,000 a year to do. I need to pay attention to this. So there's that element of it. But I think more broadly, my observation is that there's a lack of awareness of how much is changing right now, just because it's changing in just those specific areas, and it can feel safe. It can feel like, well, it's never going to touch what I do, and I think that is naive, and I think that those people are missing. Not that I know what's going to happen and how it's going to affect them, but I think that they're missing the opportunity to learn. They're missing the opportunity to see something new, to apply it, and to be the person who says, "Oh, hey, this could change my world. It might not be here right now, but it could be here soon." Like a great example of this, I think, is and this is like feels really small in the grand scheme of like the whole world, but I think it's a great illustration. Is there's a company called Document Crunch that is in the construction space that they use an AI tool to interpret legal contracts on construction projects and bring the project spec from the legalese that's in the contract to the field, so that the field can make appropriate decisions based on what the contract says. Like, historically this has never been the case. Historically, there's a contract and you have a general counsel in-house who reads it and tells you, what it means. And so if you're running jobs in the field, you're just like, well, here's how we usually do things. And then either you have to talk to the general counsel and be like, can you please tell me what the contract says, because I need to make a decision here if something changes or something goes wrong, or you just make the decision and then they tell you no, because there's this fine print over here that says this. And Document Crunch is making solving that problem, and it feels really small, but if you're a general counsel at a construction company, it's a big deal. It changes your job fundamentally. Yep. And maybe right now, somebody who's a lawyer is probably listening to me and like, oh, well, yeah, no, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't work because of this. That's not the point. In fact, I've been sharing some posts on LinkedIn of diagrams that Dolly 3 is generating of construction equipment, where I ask it to label construction equipment. Yeah, they're funny. That's why I'm sharing them. They're amusing because it doesn't label them correctly, and it comes up with nonsensical names and stuff. But to me, it's both. Those things are the illustration in right out in the open of what we're missing, which is that a lot of us are overestimating what AI can do right now, or painting this big picture, and then people see those pictures and they're like, yeah, no, that AI is never, AI is not smart. AI is not able to do anything. And I'm like, you don't understand. Yep. A year ago, this was impossible. There was no way to write a text, to write a message that said, show me a picture of an excavator with labels for the equipment. Yep. Nothing would happen. There was no, it's a new concept that you could write text and then have a picture. Oh,
even in the speed of AI, 3 months ago, it couldn't even create text.
Exactly.
No text.
Exactly.
And the idea that it could even create text at all from nothing blows my... When I saw that image, that graph, I was like, that's terrifying. And I think people do. They just sit there and they're like, stupid AI, it's never going to do anything. Yep. But that's what's scary, is that we become so used to technology doing anything. It's almost like nothing surprises us. We don't even see what's actually happening. This is scary. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. You were on the roll there.
You're good. No, I think I keep sharing those things. Well, number one, because they they do well on LinkedIn, and you got to please the algorithm. But people interact with them, people like them. But I think that it's interesting that a lot of the interaction is, haha, stupid AI. And yes, that is the joke. That's why I share it. But it's also, if that's all that you think when you see it, then you're missing the fact
100%.
that 3 months ago the text didn't exist, and 6 months ago it couldn't generate anything close to looking like a piece of equipment. It's still getting it somewhat wrong, but 6 months ago, it couldn't generate anything like that. A year ago, it generated a fuzzy, ugly, like, attempt at a picture. And a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, this as a concept
couldn't do it at
didn't
all.
exist.
Wasn't even not even a concept. Exactly.
Yeah.
It gets. I mean, I ride this line all the time because I was most of this year an absolute alarmist, I would say. Like I was waving the flag, like, people, you need to wake up. You don't. Do you not understand what's coming? And I guess you pointed out why that is. I suppose it is those of us who are being immediately impacted by this that are the most aware of it, I suppose. And most of the world isn't yet because their rock is still secure. But I've seen the AI prying me away from my rock forcibly. And so I think for me, it's like, hey, do you see, like, wave the white flag? Where do you feel like the right line is? Because you see it also. Like, how far do you feel like there's almost an obligation for those of us who are the first wave of those being impacted by this? Do you feel like it's somewhat your duty to be like, hey, you need to see this for what it really is, because at least maybe you can have a little bit more of a heads up than I did? Or because people just, when you talk this way to the average person, they just look at you like you're insane. You just you're they really do, because it hasn't impacted them, and it's silly to them. It's funny because they point to things like the prompt that you gave of the tractor and they just look at that as a silly nonsense. It's not going to affect me, but it is. So I don't know. Where do you feel like that line is? I know we're almost out of time. I don't mean to jump into another conversation, but
there's a dozen other conversations you and I could have, and I love
no
this.
Kidding. Just keeps
stuff.
going.
But I think overall that's a tough question to answer. I think that overall we're going to, all of us are going to be forced into this one way or another. We're going to experience it. Like, for people who, right now, who are, who used to hire Jason or, hire a video editor, for them, this feels like a win, because it went from costing them thousands of dollars to do a video to now they just go online to, whatever website, and they upload their video and it's done. They're like, yay, AI is cool. They don't, they're experiencing the other side of it. At some point, I think a lot of us will experience the side that you and I are seeing this year. Whether or not it happens quickly, really, I think depends on whether or not people are ready and willing to acknowledge the fact that they don't fundamentally, understand, or that the world is changing in ways they don't understand. Like, we have to be able to acknowledge that our construct of how the world works it's always wrong, right? Like, it has to be wrong because it has to be simple enough for us to hold in our mind. But usually it's that, like, wrong but useful concept where it's like, okay, it's not literally exactly how the world works, but it's how it works most of the time. And we have this concept in our mind. And at some point we're going to have to face the dissonance as we start to see the facts that disagree with our concept of the world. And that, the sooner, to me, it's less about, like, I'm less concerned about telling people, hey, AI is going to take your job, and more about when you start, like, encouraging people that when you start to see things that don't match up with your concept of how the world works, practice questioning your concept to make sure that it's right. It's not that you have to always change your mind, but you need to practice that flexibility, that ability to hold something in your mind and say, I believe this is how everything works, but also then say, well, what if it's wrong? What if it's wrong in this way? How would that change things? How does that work with my current understanding of the world? So that's like a really big picture, answer to your question. But that's how I'm looking at it. It's less about, like, this specific piece of technology or the specific company or advancement is going to change your life forever, and more about you need to learn how to bend and how to be flexible. and how to see change and see new things, and incorporate them into your understanding of the world. And if we can learn to do that, then hopefully we can make it through this relatively unscathed.
Mm. It's so true, because it's true outside of AI. Like, the world is just changing.
Yeah,
AI is
exactly.
one way that it's changing, but it's changing in multiple ways. And I think that you're
Yeah.
right. This is a good time. I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan, and he talks about how giants are going to roam the earth again. So just get yourself in order. Like, that's, I think, the best thing we can do. It's like, like, really, like,
Yeah.
figure out what going back to what we said, and this is the last thing I'll say, is just figuring out not just what value you bring other people, what do you value, period, in your life, and really take a hold of your life, yourself, and what you value and what matters to you, and then figure out a way to put that into the world, and bring value to other people through it. Probably the best thing we can do.
Yeah.
Anyways,
Man,
we can keep going and going.
Oh,
I
yeah.
feel like we just warmed up. We just started the conversation right now.
Right. Yeah, exactly. No, man, this has been a ton of fun, and I appreciate you coming on and, like, bringing a bunch of incendiary topics and opinions and ideas. I love it. This is good stuff.
Blast.
Yeah,
100%.
It's always fun.